February 3rd, 1943, 12:55 in the morning. A torpedo slammed into the hull of the USAT Dorchester, 100 miles from Greenland. The ship began to die. 902 men were aboard. Most were asleep. Many were in their underwear. The explosion killed the power. The lights went out, and in the darkness, men began to scream. Through that pandemonium, 4 men moved with impossible calm. They wore crosses on their collars. One wore the tablets of the law. A Methodist minister, a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Dutch Reformed pastor. They had known each other for 3 months. They would die together in 27 minutes. And what they did in those final moments would become one of the most powerful stories of World War II.
Your father's generation knew this story. It was printed in newspapers from coast to coast, memorialized on postage stamps, taught in Sunday schools and Hebrew schools alike. 4 men of different faiths standing together on a sinking deck, giving away their life jackets to strangers. They called them the immortal chaplains. But before they were legends, they were men. Fathers, husbands, sons. Each had walked a different path to that frozen night in the North Atlantic. Each had written letters home that still survive. This is their story, in their own words.
George Lansing Fox was 42 years old, the oldest of the 4, and he had seen war before. At 17, he had lied about his age to join the Army in 1917, served as a medical orderly on the Western Front, earned a Silver Star for dragging a wounded soldier off a battlefield filled with poison gas. He wore no mask himself. The Great War broke something in George Fox, and it called something out of him too. After the war, he became a Methodist minister, married, had 2 children, served small congregations in Vermont, where he was known as the Little Minister for his 5'7" frame and his enormous heart. When Pearl Harbor came, Fox was 41, too old for combat, comfortable in his parish, safe. He told his wife Isadora, "I've got to go. I know from experience what those boys are about to face. They need me." He enlisted on August 8, 1942, the same day his 18-year-old son Wyatt joined the Marine Corps. Father and son, going to war together, going to war apart.
Alexander David Good was 31, a rabbi from Brooklyn, the son of a rabbi. A man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life, though he didn't know it. At Eastern High School in Washington, he was an athlete. Tennis, swimming, track. A young man full of laughter and energy. But the return of the unknown soldier to Arlington had marked him. He walked 30 miles to attend that ceremony because he thought driving would show insufficient respect. Good earned his PhD from Johns Hopkins at 29. He married his childhood sweetheart, Teresa. In 1939, their daughter Rosalie was born. In York, Pennsylvania, where he served as rabbi, Good did something unprecedented. He founded Boy Scout Troop 37, the first scout troop in America where boys earned Catholic, Jewish, and Protestant religious awards side by side. Unity across faith. It was his calling before he had words for it. When the Navy rejected his chaplain application in 1941, he was crushed. After Pearl Harbor, the Army said yes.
Clark Poling was 32, the youngest looking of the 4, with a boyish face that belied his intensity. His father, Daniel Poling, was famous. A military chaplain in the First War, a radio evangelist whose voice reached millions, a man whose shadow was long. Clark could have hidden in that shadow. Instead, he stepped out of it. When he told his father he was enlisting, the elder Poling assumed Clark meant as a regular soldier. "No," Clark said, "as a chaplain." Daniel warned him, "Don't you know that chaplains have the highest mortality rate of all?" Clark's answer was simple. "I'm not going to hide behind the church and some safe office out of the firing line." Before he shipped out, Clark wrote his father a letter. The words would outlive him. "Don't pray for my safe return. That wouldn't be fair. Just pray that I shall do my duty, never be a coward, and have the strength, courage, and understanding of men. Just pray that I shall be adequate."
John Patrick Washington was 34, a Catholic priest from Newark, New Jersey, the eldest of 7 children in a tough Irish neighborhood. He'd almost died twice before the war found him. A BB gun accident nearly cost him his sight as a boy. A childhood fever nearly killed him outright. But John Washington was stubborn. He had known since age 7 that he would be a priest. Nothing could stop that. After ordination in 1935, he served parishes throughout New Jersey. His parishioners remembered him for 2 things: his laughter and his impatience to serve. The Navy rejected him. His eyesight, damaged by that childhood accident, wasn't good enough. The Army said yes, and Washington immediately began asking for overseas duty. In September 1942, he wrote to headquarters, "Once more, may I ask you to consider my application for overseas duty. If I am being too fresh in requesting it, then slap me down." He got his wish.
They met at the Army Chaplain School at Harvard in the fall of 1942. Fox, the oldest, Good, the scholar, Poling, the preacher's son, Washington, the street kid from Newark. 4 men from 4 faiths, 4 different backgrounds, 4 different Americas, and somehow they became brothers. One of Clark Poling's cousins remembered, they hit it off well at chaplain school. They had prayed together a number of times before that final crisis. Sharing their faith was not just a first-time deal for them. By November 1942, all 4 were assigned to Camp Miles Standish in Massachusetts, awaiting overseas deployment, together. Their destination? A remote Army base in Greenland. Their ship? The USAT Dorchester.
The Dorchester had once been a luxury coastal liner. Telephone in every stateroom, ice cream served late into the night, dance music on the deck. The war had transformed her. Bunks stacked 3 high, 900 bodies packed into spaces meant for 300, guns mounted on the deck. She was old, she was slow, and she was sailing through Torpedo Junction. The convoy left New York on January 23, 1943. 6 ships, 3 Coast Guard cutters for escort. Destination, Greenland. The German U-boats had already sunk dozens of ships in these waters. Everyone aboard knew the odds. On February 2nd, one of the escort ships flashed a signal. "We are being followed." Captain Hans Danielson ordered all men to sleep in their clothes, keep life jackets close. Many ignored him. The hold was stifling hot. The life jackets were uncomfortable. It was a decision that would kill them.
At 12:55 a.m. on February 3rd, the German submarine U-223 fired a spread of 3 torpedoes. One found its mark. It struck the Dorchester amidships, far below the waterline. The explosion ripped through the boiler room. Steam and ammonia gas billowed through the corridors. The power died, the lights went out, and the ship began to list. The blast killed scores of men instantly. Many more were trapped below decks, groping in the darkness, unable to find the ladders. Those who made it topside found chaos. Men screaming, men crying, men fighting for lifeboats that wouldn't launch. Some boats had been damaged by the explosion. Others were frozen to their davits. The crew couldn't get them free, and the water was 34 degrees.
Through the pandemonium, 4 men moved. They had been awake when the torpedo hit, perhaps still talking, perhaps praying together, as they often did. Now they spread out across the deck, calming the terrified, guiding the wounded, pointing men toward the lifeboats. Private William Bednar found himself in the oil-covered water, surrounded by bodies and debris. I could hear men crying, pleading, praying, he remembered. I could also hear the chaplains preaching courage. Their voices were the only thing that kept me going.
Petty Officer John Mahoney was heading back to his cabin. He had forgotten his gloves. The Arctic air was cutting through him. A voice stopped him. "Rabbi Good, where are you going?" "To get my gloves." Good pulled off his own gloves, held them out. "Here, take these." "I can't take those," Mahoney said. "Never mind, I have 2 pairs." Mahoney took the gloves. Only later did he understand. Rabbi Good didn't have 2 pairs. He had already decided he wasn't leaving the Dorchester.
The chaplains found a storage locker, life jackets. They began passing them out as fast as they could. Engineer Grady Clark was watching. What he saw next would stay with him for the rest of his life. The supply of life jackets ran out. Men were still waiting, still begging. And then, without hesitation, all 4 chaplains reached up and removed their own life jackets. They gave them to the next 4 men in line. John Ladd, another survivor, witnessed the moment. "It was the finest thing I have seen or hope to see this side of heaven."
They knew what they were doing. Without a life jacket, in 34-degree water, a man had perhaps 20 minutes to live, maybe less. The Dorchester was sinking fast. No rescue was coming in time. The Coast Guard cutters hadn't even seen the explosion yet. The chaplains were choosing to die. But here is what made their sacrifice immortal, what lifted it from tragedy to transcendence. When they gave away their life jackets, Rabbi Good did not call out for a Jew. Father Washington did not call out for a Catholic. Reverend Fox and Reverend Poling did not call out for a Protestant. They simply gave their life jackets to the next man in line. Not to their own, to whoever stood before them.
The Dorchester's bow rose. The stern began to slip beneath the waves. Survivors in the lifeboats looked back. What they saw, they would never forget. The 4 chaplains were standing on the tilting deck, arms linked, braced against the slant. They were praying in English, in Hebrew, in Latin. 3 languages, 4 faiths, 1 voice rising into the frozen night. They were singing hymns. 27 minutes after the torpedo struck, the Dorchester disappeared beneath the waves. The 4 chaplains went down with her.
The Coast Guard cutter Comanche had seen the flash of the explosion. She raced back through the darkness, ignoring the danger of another torpedo attack.
The cutter Escanaba developed a new technique on the spot. Crewmen in wetsuits dove into the freezing water, swimming to survivors, lashing them to ropes so they could be hauled aboard. One of those crewmen, steward's mate Charles Walter David Jr., rescued 93 men that night. He would die of pneumonia 54 days later. When the sun rose, rescue ships found hundreds of bodies floating in the water, held up by their life jackets, dead from hypothermia. Of the 902 men aboard the Dorchester, only 230 survived. 672 died, including 4 chaplains who had given away their only chance to live.
When the news reached American shores, the nation was stunned. The magnitude of the loss, the horror of dying in freezing water, in darkness, far from home. But it was the story of the 4 chaplains that captured the imagination, that gave meaning to the tragedy. 4 men, 4 faiths, 1 sacrifice. In a nation at war, where religious and ethnic divisions still ran deep, their story was a beacon. A rabbi giving his gloves to whoever needed them. A priest offering absolution to whoever asked. A Protestant minister calming the fears of whoever stood before him. Not asking who they were, not asking what they believed, just serving.
Your father knew this story. Your grandfather knew it. It was printed in every newspaper, preached from every pulpit, held up as the example of what America could be at its best. 4 faiths, 1 purpose, no division. Maybe your father saw the postage stamp issued in their honor in 1948, the first stamp to commemorate heroes who died in World War II. Maybe he knew that Congress declared February 3rd 4 Chaplains Day, that it's still observed today. Maybe he served with a chaplain himself and understood, because of this story, what those men were willing to give.
In Vermont, Isadora Fox received the telegram. Her husband was gone. Her son Wyatt was still fighting in the Pacific. In York, Pennsylvania, Teresa Good held 3-year-old Rosalie. The little girl would grow up without a father, but she would grow up knowing what he did. In New Jersey, the Washington family gathered. 7 siblings, their eldest brother gone. In Ohio, Daniel Poling received the news about his son, the famous radio evangelist, the man whose voice reached millions. Now he had to find words for this. Clark had written him, "Just pray that I shall be adequate." He had been more than adequate. He had been immortal.
The military wanted to award them the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest decoration. Congress tried, twice, but the Medal of Honor requires heroism under fire, enemy fire, combat. The chaplains had not been in combat. They had been in disaster, in sacrifice, in grace. So Congress created something new, something that had never existed before and would never be given again. The 4 Chaplains Medal, a special medal for heroism, authorized in 1960, awarded posthumously to their families in 1961 by President Eisenhower. The only military decoration ever created for a single act. Because what they did transcended categories.
The 4 chaplains are everywhere in America if you know where to look. A stained glass window in the Pentagon Chapel, a memorial sanctuary aboard the Queen Mary in Long Beach, a chapel in Philadelphia dedicated by President Truman in 1951,
Streets and schools bear their names. Memorial services are held every February 3rd from New Jersey to California. In 2002, something remarkable happened. 3 survivors of the Dorchester met with 2 German sailors who had served on the U-boat that sank her. They shook hands. They embraced. They wept together. The same spirit that had moved the 4 chaplains, reaching across the lines that divide us.
Your father's generation understood something that gets lost sometimes. Faith is not about walls. It's about bridges. The rabbi didn't ask if the man who needed his gloves was Jewish. The priest didn't ask if the man who needed absolution was Catholic. The ministers didn't ask if the men who needed calm were Protestant. They just gave. They just served. They just loved. That's what your father saw in them. That's why this story mattered. That's why it still matters.
This story survives because 230 men came home to tell it. Because John Ladd saw them give away their life jackets and said, "It was the finest thing I have seen or hope to see this side of heaven." Because Private Bednar, drowning in oil-covered water, heard their voices preaching courage and held on. Because Petty Officer Mahoney wore Rabbi Good's gloves for the rest of his life and told everyone who asked where he got them. The 4 chaplains left behind letters, prayers written in the days before they died, words to wives and children they would never see again. Clark Poling's letter to his father survives. "Just pray that I shall be adequate." John Washington's letter to headquarters survives. "Once more may I ask you to consider my application for overseas duty?" They asked to serve. They got their wish, and they served until the deck slipped beneath their feet.
February 3rd, 1943, 12:55 a.m. 4 men, 4 faiths, 1 moment. Arms linked, voices raised, praying together as the cold Atlantic rose around them. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. They weren't just friends, they were strangers. 900 strangers on a dying ship. And 4 men decided that every one of them was worth dying for.
Foxhole Chronicles, preserving the forgotten voices of World War II. Every uniform had a name. Every name had a story. These men are leaving us. Their stories must not die with them.